Remember to push record. That's a key.
Oh no, how many times has that happened?
Once.
Once.
Once with Chaz on the show that we do together.
Uh-huh.
And we literally made it like 45 minutes into the conversation and then looked down and we're like, oh. But he's such a team player, a game, that he was like, let's do it again. Right back from the top and we'll just regurgitate what we already said. And
It's cool. It's kind of like a dry run. Maybe it's better the second time around.
Who knows?
Yeah.
We'll never know because we don't have the tape. Dane Hantz, welcome back to
Thank
the program.
You. Good to be here.
Yeah.
Love all the new gear. This is really slick.
Thank you. Yeah, we've come a long way in the podcast world.
All right.
So we're sitting in Paragon and formerly associated with Vulcan. I think COVID's been wonderful for the surfboard business.
It's been insane.
And we saw a lot of, people selling more boards than they've ever sold, expanding their business, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
How has COVID been for you?
Well, I mean, it was good and bad. Like, honestly, I experienced both. I saw the worst of it, watched my sister die, and that was tough.
From COVID?
Yeah. So I was kind of like down low on that when she was ill because I didn't really know how the whole COVID thing was going to play out. And I didn't want, to come out and say that and then all of a sudden, like, I don't know, it's such a weird world these days, and like you're afraid like what you want to admit to the court of public opinion or whatnot. So I kind of played it on the down low. But yeah, she got Delta and
Keep going.
had a really bad time, and it was unreal because I saw that COVID is as much a respiratory illness as it is a neurological, as much as it is a cardiovascular disease, and she was affected in all those ways. Not only did she have like the severe fluid in the lungs, damage there, but she was paralyzed from the neck down and couldn't speak, and then ultimately died of a heart attack after she got over the respiratory part. So that was really hard because, as you know, my mom and dad had also passed away just prior to that. So I had a really, really hard run that led up to 2020. So that was really tough. And on the flip side of the coin, we were going through the lockdowns and what is an essential business and are we essential? I don't know. And I thought like, well, we might as well just shut down. But as it was, things got busier than ever. I think anybody who made any kind of board or toy or bike or whatever, like saw a massive increase in business. People now with the work from home thing, they had a lot of leisure time, and then with stimulus checks, there was just an explosion of business, which kind of irritated me at first when I because I would see people come in and wanting to buy boards, and it's like this, shouldn't you be spending this on rent and groceries? But ultimately, it finds its way into the economy, and as we're seeing now, maybe that's not such a great thing with inflation, and it's been a crazy time. But what's interesting is that we saw through 2020, 2021, that there was this huge demand for boards and an explosion of business that was caused by the two factors that I mentioned. People were having more free time and more disposable income. And then I thought, well, that'll be like a flash in the pan. And as soon as that works its way through the pipe, then things are going to go back to normal. It got busier, and I couldn't figure it out until I finally realized what was happening is that all of the manufacturers that were producing boards overseas were having a hard time getting things into the country. And it wasn't just logistically having a hard time, but also the cost of bringing in a container into the U.S. like quadrupled, if not 5 times over.
Crazy.
Yeah. So now all of a sudden it's not economically feasible to produce over there. So everyone's trying to figure out how can we do it here. And that caused like the second explosion in business, and that's been wild. Now the landscape is kind of changing. We'll see how it goes. I don't know if we could use some time, maybe some downtime to like clean and fix things and do like the maintenance that hasn't really been done because we've just been so busy trying to keep up.
So in 2020, you thought about closing the business.
Yeah.
You decided not to because of all that demand.
Yeah.
But you're not producing Vulcan surfboards anymore. So tell me about that story.
Yeah. So it, making custom boards is, it's hard. It's really tough. It's a very demanding job. And I found out that many of the things, actually everything that I did with Vulcan came from like a very emotional place. And we were talking about Wayne earlier, and like that's why I love Wayne Rich. Wayne is like, he's really intense, and like it conveys through everything that he does, and you see it in his boards. Like you don't even have to, you could put, if you didn't know Wayne, you could put Wayne in a room and talk to him for 5 minutes and see his boards and a group of other boards, and you'd know exactly which boards are Wayne's boards. And it's rad because there's a congruence. And I feel that too. There's like a certain intensity and an emotional depth that like goes into the things that you create. And after like all of the terrible things that I went through with my life, I found that I just could not do it. I would come in and try and recreate the things that like I had done. And I would look at my social media and see like all the things that I had done. And it's like, it's like, how did I do this? And it's like inside I was really fucked up. I was really fucked up. And I just couldn't do it. And I felt like I can't bluff my way through this. So it's a really good time to take a break from this.
So lost inspiration, creativity.
Yeah, I couldn't access that. I feel like internally it was just, everything was really mixed up, and I could not convey that creativity into an artifact. And so, yeah, loss of inspiration, loss of creativity. But it was also weird, like just physically and mechanically, like I struggled with like, how do I do these things? So it's not right to try and just fumble your way through it. And it's kind of unfortunate because I had like some collaborations and things like that I need to come full circle on and kind of like tidy up, but I just couldn't do it.
Can you explain how your business is structured that it would allow you to take a break from that side of it? Because I said initially we're sitting in Paragon.
Yeah. So Paragon is the other thing that I do in the surf industry. And so what that is we are millwork, scan, and design. And we also do a few other things, but so we work on the wholesale side. We work on the manufacturer's end. And because it got so busy, beginning in 2020, although I was not building Vulcans, like there was a huge demand for Paragon. And it's great for me because, I can stay busy, and I really enjoy having a supportive role in the surf industry on the back end. I love the manufacturing side, and I like helping people. I like working with people, and we get to work with some amazing people. And so it's, it's through all the ups and downs for going on 12, 13 years now. Paragon has always been a constant. And so, yeah, that's what I've been up to.
So for listeners, they've heard of shaping machines.
Yeah.
I would presume.
Yeah.
And they might assume that a shaper either owns that machine or has that machine in the factory, and so they can either hand shape a board or shape it on a machine. Mm-hmm. Paragon's actually a third party service. So shapers can send you their orders and their files. You cut the board for them, give it back to the shaper finishes it by hand.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. And where we really kind of excel, like sort of our niche is working with a lot of the more contemporary and like a lot of the older guys too, surfer shapers who are transitioning into like the digital realm. And so, we scan their boards and refine their designs and get them ready for production, and then mill and then refine and work with them in that way. And that's really cool because many of our relationships with the people we work with are, it's like a constant development. Like I've been working with Ryan Lovelace, and I love Ryan. And it's been great to work for him, and we have a great working relationship, and we're constantly refining the files and updating things, and it's really cool, and it helps him, and it's been a very rewarding relationship for us too. So that's been great. So,
as those two businesses previously existed side by side, Paragon and Vulcan, in the same space, even in this building.
There's a lot of funny observations with that too, and it's really it's really interesting because they're not. Those are two fucking hard businesses to have like under one roof.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of people who are Paragon customers. I've had two in specific tell me like, dude, like you're such a nice guy, and like I was so intimidated to come in here because they saw Vulcan, and it like, it's I think they were self-conscious maybe or something, like they didn't want to bring their board and have me like judge it or something, or compare it to something, which is not my trip at all. But it did make it kind of a complicated relationship. And the other thing is that like I'm not what's a good way to say this? So there's a judgment about millwork and scan all the digital things that we do in the surf industry, where some people might. They judge that, and I've always been open about it. I don't know what the big deal is, but a lot of shapers really are. They're very clandestine about the fact that they're milling their boards, scanning them, and they don't want to know. So that created kind of a complicated situation too. As it is, like that's really changing now, and it's more out in the open, and fewer people are closeted about it, and rightly so, because we do some amazing things. But
so. I'll get to that in a second, because that's really kind of the focus of what I wanted to have our conversation about.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
But before I do that, those businesses existed in your head as the Paragon thing is more you said Vulcan being creative, it required inspiration, all that kind of stuff. Paragon, you could just kind of run as a business, a little less passionately, because it's a more nuts and bolts program, correct?
Well, see, it's. I think what I'm saying is that with Vulcan, like there's really like there's two parts to Vulcan. There's the shapes and the shaping and the plan form and the design of the boards, but then the other part, which I really consider like when you see a Vulcan, like what it is mostly about is like the glassing.
Okay.
And the incorporation of like exotic fabrics and weaves and composites and things like that. So that's where what really hung me up is, doing like this super intensive resin tinted with carbon on this complicated cut lap, and like it's just like, oh my gosh, like that's what was really challenging for me.
Got it. So as it relates to the machine and the conversation about there being, in the surf space, there was always the conversation of there's no soul in the machine, and there's soul in, hand shaping. And so people were anti-machine. And then there became an acceptance of the machine for the ability to hit volume.
Yeah.
For shapers who are expanding their businesses, there's only one way to kind of meet those numbers, and the machine allows you to do that. I think that conversation is shifting now even more. And the machine is kind of being seen as there is an art to the machine. Yes. There's an art to the design on the computer, and the machine allowing you to do. So let's kind of focus on, let's talk about Ryan Lovelace first, since you brought him up, because Ryan was a guy who was anti-machine for a period of time.
Yeah.
And now he's embraced the machine for a certain portion of his business.
Yeah.
And it's probably unfair to him to have you explain his viewpoint. We should have Ryan explain it, and maybe we will in the future. But what is his rationale for incorporating the machine into his business?
Well, I can tell you from my perspective what I've seen multiple times over the last decade.
Okay.
And it's kind of a funny situation. And I was thinking of an analogy this last weekend, and it's really kind of interesting. So bear with me because this is kind of long-winded, but
sure.
I think it helps everyone to understand, and it helps me too to look at it. So I imagine surfing is like this big tree, okay? It's this big tree, and it's got a big round trunk. And if you looked inside there, you'd see all the rings, you know, on and around. And on the upper end, you see the branches, okay? And they're reaching up. And on the bottom end, you see the roots, and they're reaching down. What everyone sees, you know, like, and I've said this before too, there's two parts of surfing. There's surf culture, okay, and then there's surf industry. And they cross paths at a few things, but for the most part, they're totally independent of one another. When you see the branches of that tree, the leaves and maybe the flowers and this and that, you're seeing the surf culture, okay? What people don't see are the roots. That's the surf industry. Now, each of these things is vital to the tree, and they grow in equal measure. And one can't exist. You can't have the branches without the roots. You can't have the roots without the trunk and the leaves, but they happen side by side. The problem is that, you know, working on the root end of it where we're at, people don't always see that. And where, to me, that is significant is like in the realm of millwork or scan and design. And people don't realize like how much of a factor that is in surf industry and in surf culture too. And a lot of people don't want to know. They don't want to know.
Yeah.
It's almost like trying to tell a little kid like that the presents aren't made at the North Pole, right. You know? And this heresy to like say that Santa Claus doesn't exist. But the reality is like these roots are real, and they're growing deeper, and they're adding strength to the tree and the branches as well. Where this gets complicated is there's a lot of surfer shapers, and I've dealt with almost every one of them, and they start and they've got a novel idea and a cool image and this whole trip, and it's like, whoa, it really captures people's imagination and excitement and the culture part, the branches, you know? And people see that and they're charmed by it, and rightly so. And maybe like it's amazing, okay? And they take off, and they're getting traction, and they're making a lot of boards. And part of their whole trip is, part of their whole branch is the idea that like I have this persona, and like, you know, I'm you know, making the boards by hand lovingly, and this is, you know, this is how I do it, and there's the soul and this. But what they rapidly find out is that to make it in the industry part and the root part, like it's almost impossible to hand shape all these boards, especially if you're trying to glass them as well, which is another part of it, which adds like another whole layer of complexity, like being a board builder as opposed to just a shaper who drops the shape off at the glass shop. It gets really complicated. And then what they find out is like, if they've been like super critical of the root part, you know, it gets really hard to maintain the branch part because you painted yourself into a corner. And you gotta like grow your business, and maybe you need the millwork, but like you can't have anybody know because that's gonna,
right.
It gets complicated. It gets really complicated. And I've seen a number of this happen exactly to a number of guys. What I love about Ryan is like he's really the first one who's been totally vocal about the fact that like I'm changing, and I'm incorporating this into my production. Not all of it. Ryan still hand shapes boards, and I will tell you that Ryan is a phenomenal hand shaper, and it's evidenced by a number of the boards that we scan for him. And so it's rad because in my mind, like, people get really too hung up over is it hand shaped, or is it in congruence with, all my ideas about what a surfboard really is in terms of like the culture and the heritage and this and that, versus like, does the fucking thing actually work? Like, what is the bottom line, regardless of how it was made, That's what's really important to me. The intellectual property and the design, to me, that has like more value than anything else, regardless of how like it was made. That's the bottom line. Does it work? And I don't have to tell you that Ryan's boards work. They all work. So that's really interesting.
So part of his transparency, though, is that the boards coming off the machine are labeled separately.
Yeah,
They're called Love Machine.
Yeah.
Which is clever.
Yeah.
It's a great little, it's a great name.
Yeah. It was funny because the way he explained it to me is he was like, I was thinking about doing this and I wasn't sure, and Ryan had actually reached out to me like a couple times, like prior to the creation of Love Machine, and I knew like what was going on, with him, and I knew he was exploding, and I knew he was making a lot of boards, and I knew he really needed help, and so I was just kind of like leaving that door open, and then pretty soon the conversation started, and it was funny because in his mind he was toying with the idea like, how do I approach this? And I think somebody had said to him like, oh my God, you can do this and you can call it Love Machine. And he was like, oh my God, well now I got to do it.
Yeah, kind of.
Which I thought was awesome.
Totally.
Yeah.
The other business, or the other way that he approached this problem previously, was Trimcraft, which is an excellent, also like a very savvy, very smart way to approach it.
Right.
Which I'll just, for the listeners, it's worth mentioning. They are not using machine. They're hand shaping those boards, and they're designs from himself, Jerry Lopez, and Rich Pavel, and maybe they have others now. I'm not sure. But it started out with those three shapers, and so each of those three shapers provided a couple of different designs, and then they employ young up-and-coming shapers in a given region to fulfill all the orders for that region.
Right.
So if you can't buy a Pavel or a Lopez or a Lovelace, or you don't want to wait to get the boards, you can order a model through Trimcraft that is shaped by a local up-and-coming shaper who's shaping and building the board to the specs of those three shapers.
Right.
So that, I thought, was also a great way to kind of start growing the business, fulfilling all that extra demand without utilizing, the machine at that point. But, of course, now the machine has relevance, too, for his business.
Yeah.
So let's talk. Not all machines are created equal.
No.
Which I think listeners aren't aware of.
Yeah.
They just hear machine and think it's all the same.
Yeah.
What is Paragon doing? What is the machine? Or more importantly, what is the scanning process?
Okay. So my machine is actually a custom-built 3DM, and 3DM was started by John Yao, and John Yao is made some amazing machines. This specific one was one that was custom designed by John for me. When we were designing it, I actually flew over to Maui on the Hana side, Haiku, and went to John's house. The design was laid out with tape on his kitchen floor. We spent time determining what I would need, what would be important for some of the things that we specialize in, which is complexity and capacity, because we do a lot of large boards. I've done several boards for the Big Wave tour, as well as solid wood boards, redwood, balsa. But we also do really complex stuff. And some of those things you see in Ryan's board, the Love Machine boards, with the compound cuts and layered cuts, which requires tool changing and running a separate file in order to cut these details. into the boards. So having John design a machine that was up to our specs and standards to help accomplish the things that where we focus in Paragon. There's a lot of machines out there, and I've seen some good ones, and I've seen some bad ones. The one we have is very robust, it makes all the difference in terms of quality. Is what I can say.
Well, it's one strategy for running a cutting business is to cut as many boards as possible.
Well,
so you'd rather get an order from a large shortboard manufacturer who needs 50 of the same thing,
right?
And you can just put them on a production line, right?
Yeah, it definitely, and we do quite a bit of that. But where we really shine is like there again for like the surfer shapers who are doing custom orders, and there's multiple different sizes for all the different customers, and different features and adjustments of files, and designing like different things, and we really try and get it down to the nitty gritty. I mean, we get right down to like a 32nd of an inch tolerance, and helping to what's the word? Well, helping to create like these custom boards, and that's really like I feel like where we shine. We do the production stuff also, where there's multiple size runs of a given size, but the custom boards is one of our strengths.
So, can you explain? I think on one side of the business, they could just send you a file.
Yeah.
You order the appropriate blank, you put the blank on the machine, and you run the cut.
Yeah.
Yours involves a scanning process. So can you explain what all those dots are on the surfboard and what this device is?
So that's kind of interesting because that was an investment we made in 2020. Prior to that, we scanned all of our boards by digital probe, which is also very accurate. But what that is we attach a probe onto the CNC, and it goes around and touches the boards in hundreds of points over the entire board. And the best way to describe this is imagine like if you were a blind person and they were feeling your face, and they would say, okay, yeah, here's your cheeks, that's what they like, here's your nose, like kind of big. But and then you get a sense. The CNC is doing the same thing. Every time that probe touches down on the board, it sends a signal which creates a point cloud on an XYZ coordinate system, and that point cloud is the dimension of your board. We then bring that into Shape 3DX, and there's an importation process. It's a translation, really, of the point cloud into the actual design of the board. And once we have that, then we can modify the board. We could maybe change the tail. We can adjust the rocker, of course, the dimensions, outlines. Basically, any way you want to modify that board, you can. So that's really cool because there's been a number of boards that we've scanned that are legendary boards. These are iconic boards. And then we'll create an iteration off of that. And so you get a different design that has essentially the same DNA as the original. And that's an amazing way to create like another amazing board. And I've seen some amazing boards come from that process. But where we used to scan by digital probe, we did everything by that. But recently, the laser scanning has come a long way. And that's something I've seen for like a long time, and I kind of fussed with it a number of years ago. And, the ability and the accuracy really wasn't there yet. It's there now. And so we invested in a laser scanner, and part of the process is, surfboards are really tough to scan because there's not really any geometry in the board. It's an organic shape. Whereas if you're scanning something like a machine part, there's lots of geometry. There's lots of hard edges and fixed dimensions, and it's symmetrical. Surfboards aren't like that at all. So in order to help the scan along, we put these positioning targets all over the board, and it helps the laser to pick up dimension and shape and distance, and help to create that point cloud. that we then import into Shape 3DX. So that's what you're seeing there when you see all those funny looking dots on there. Gotcha. It's kind of like in Hollywood. I don't know if you've ever seen, sometimes they have actors on a green screen and they're wearing that bodysuit and it looks like the little balls on there. It's essentially the same thing.
Got it. And obviously the more data points it's pulling off of the board, the more accurate the replication can be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And the accuracy by the laser scan is unbelievably accurate. I mean, you pick up not just pressure dings, but when you put a laminate on a board and you glass that in there, there's a little incremental amount of thickness, maybe like a playing card. It picks up that.
No way.
Yeah, it's pretty insane.
Okay, then. So when you're making the cut, do you make the cut thinner to account for the lamination on the scan?
Yeah, some guys have asked that we do that. I would say the majority of our cuts are right at the finished dimension. And the reason being is say for instance with glass, like this board behind me is 2.5 inches thick. When it gets into the shaping bay, by the time that it's done, you're losing probably a 32nd to maybe even a full 16th of thickness on the board. So then you glass it and you make that back up.
Got it.
So I typically will cut right on the number. I know some milling operations will add a 16th inch margin. I don't do that. I like to give them an exact replica. The rails are nice and tight and thickness is right there. So that's how we do it.
How much finish shaping is required for the boards coming off of your machine?
It depends on how many passes we do on the board. But say for instance, if I'm shaping a Vulcan, I want to be in and out of there within 15 or 20 minutes. And that includes boards with a swallowtail because I cut swallowtails as well. And on my boards, I had a lot of deep swallowtails. So yeah, I want to be in and out in 15 minutes, 20 minutes.
Wow.
And then we're on to the really intensive part, which is the glassing. And so for me to have that ability to really cut a board that is so close to being done is really helpful. Not only does it ensure fidelity to the shape, but it helps me because I'm a board builder and I do everything. I'm a shaper, I'm a glasser, I'm a fin setter, I'm a sander. You do all that. So whatever I can do to help that along and is definitely welcome. Yeah.
Is there any limitation to the machine? Something that it cannot replicate that the hand shaper can?
I mean, now we're cutting asymmetricals. That was one of the things that I had done for Ryan recently was the rabbit's foot. And that was a very challenging shape to capture, the asymmetry. But I mean, I'm trying to think we can do the dimension, the big boards, we can do the complexity, one of the things I haven't done that I thought would be really interested to do is my friend Dennis Jarvis, and his fireballs. I had fussed around with, not to infringe on Dennis, but just playing, designing, the channels on a fireball, which I pretty much feel like I've got it nailed. And just for laughs, I was thinking about cutting one, but I want to contact him first. And,
okay. Because that has not only the channels, but there's a step in the channels, right?
Yeah, it's a generous step that continues the channels and flutes throughout the back of the board. And even the channels themselves, it's a fluted, it's rounded in there. Right. It's not just a hard edge. They're beautiful boards. But yeah, really tough to design digitally, but we can do it.
And the machine can do it.
Yeah, the machine can do it.
Okay.
But asymmetry, would have been maybe one of the challenging things, but we can do that now. And ironically, that's one of the things that's interesting to me is over the years, I've seen the argument that people say, oh, well, I want a hand shape because that's the accuracy. Well, I've scanned hand shapes from around the world from the top guys, and there's one thing I can tell you they all had in common. It was asymmetry. But what makes a magic board? You know,
Right, exactly.
What makes a magic board? Is it perfect symmetry, or is it nuance?
Yeah.
So you kind of have to ask yourself that.
Yeah.
But I want to give people a perfectly symmetrical cut. You go make it asymmetrical on your own. That's
Sure.
fine. Whatever. I'm going to give you perfect symmetry.
What do you, so we talk about, or I started the conversation by saying that the machine, the main service or the main value of the machine is that it allows the shaper to increase their business and number of boards that they're selling, essentially.
Well, in maintaining fidelity.
So the question is, what do you see the value of the machine being for your clients?
Yeah, maintaining fidelity, maintaining like truth to the design of the board, and yes, like facilitating their production so they can meet the volume that they need in order to run a business successfully. But more importantly, I think. I mean, one of the things that's really valuable, and I've said this before, is that over time, like I've become not just like a guy that mills boards and scans them, but like a docent of my own museum of intellectual property, and it's a significant museum. And some of these guys are no longer here. And if we didn't have a digital record of the things that they had created, I feel much of what they had done could have been lost to time. And if you look historically, in history, like written account, data is what preserves, written history as opposed to like, song or dance or whatever. I mean, some of those, that part of the culture can endure, but really what preserves and has that staying power is the data. And I'm proud of that. So, and we've safeguarded and we continue to safeguard a whole library of amazing shapes. And some things people haven't even seen. Like I've got shapes from Donald Takayama. I've got shapes from, I don't want to start spouting off because there's a lot of people, some people that are really, maybe they wouldn't, I'll let them tell you that.
Sure.
But shapes that no one has seen. And I have a funny story. Like there was a surfer shaper, very well known, and we scanned all of his boards and his fishes and his mid lengths and his long boards, and he brought in this one, and we scanned initially these two shapes, and that was like what he had demand for, and that's what people wanted, and we were milling a lot of those boards, all the customs, and it was really amazing. But along the way, he had this one fish, and it was more of a traditional looking fish, and it had these looked like a pecky cedar fin on it, and with twin keel glass-ons. And I said, hey, we ought to scan that. And he said, oh yeah, I'll drop it off. And so he dropped it off and immediately went off a surf trip, which he was gone for quite some time, like months. And so I scanned the board, and it sat up front. And I come to work and I see this board. I leave work and I see this board. And after a couple months of looking at this thing, I'm like, I got to surf this. So I grabbed the board and I'm like, I'm going to take it out. So here I am, and I'm driving down the Coast Highway, and I'm going to go surf a place where I never surfed before. Nobody ever sees me. And because I just don't want anybody to see me surfing this board, like, oh my God, what are you doing on this? It's not a Vulcan. Or like, oh my gosh, it gets back to him, and then I get in trouble because I'm taking this board out. But I went to surf this little fish, and it was, now I have his other boards, like the Darling boards that everybody knows. And they're okay. It's okay. This board was insane. It was insane. It's never seen the light of day. Nobody knows it exists. And I've got a number of files like that. And it's, So it's incredibly valuable, and
So what's the Shaper's?
I don't know
reason.
I don't know, and I told him, I'm like, this is the one, you know. But it didn't have. It was more of a traditional fish shape. Okay, it didn't have.
Didn't fall in line with his brand.
It didn't fall in line with his brand and like the esoteric features the two boards that everybody knew or captivated by. And a friend of mine calls it dingle balls, and fucking guys love dingle balls. Okay. They do, and on Instagram with the lights,
I know,
and it makes an amazing picture, and your mind is like, wow, my God. Now this board, it did not have the dingle balls, okay, but it was a fucking amazing board. It was really amazing.
Turns out the fish works. The fish exists for a reason.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And the dingle ball stuff, you're right. It's novel, so we're all excited about it.
Yeah.
But the classics are classics for a reason.
Oh yeah. This is a phenomenal board.
Got it. Somebody looking in for you. Customer, maybe.
Yeah.
We'll hit pause real quick. No worries.
Oh, this is a joke.
No worries, dude.
Hey.
Just saying hi.
Hey.
Not trying to avoid you.
No.
Oh, you're having like a cool little video conference.
Yeah, we're doing a podcast.
Yeah. Oh, that's rad.
Yeah. Your board's insane, dude.
It's getting close. I wanna.
Well, fucking get in here and stand the laps. Like,
I have to go work.
okay.
I'll be back hopefully this afternoon, but I don't know what your schedule looks like.
You want me to grind it for you?
No,
No.
I kind of want to do it.
You want to take it with you and you grind the laps? Or do you want to come back here and do it later?
I'll just text you when I'm wrapping up at Bird Rock, and if you're around, great. If you're not,
Oh, you're going down there. You're going down there. Yeah. You're doing an install?
yeah, I have to like keep this guy happy. So
Okay. All right. Okay, well, message me, all right? We'll make it happen.
Okay, awesome. Thank
All right.
you.
Thanks, Joe.
Have a good podcast.
Thanks.
So this is interesting because, and I don't know how much are we off the?
I didn't actually push pause, but I'll not use it if you don't want.
What you can, but we should talk about it first. Is that like, so whereas the wholesale side of the production is a big part of it, as I talked to you before, and actually I talked to Jeff about a rapidly evolving part of it is user submitted design, and these are just guys, right? And like, like this guy, he grew up in Leucadia. He doesn't even know who Wayne Rich is. He's a great surfer.
Really?
Yeah, he's a great surfer, and it's like, I want to make my own board.
Right.
And I tell him, like, man, there is nothing fucking cooler than making your own board. And guess what? We got a whole factory here.
Yeah.
So this is a rapidly evolving and expanding part of our business. And not only is it exciting because people are so stoked to make their own board, but it's a long an opportunity we can't we can't pass up to establish logical pricing.
What's logical pricing mean?
Fucking man, like there has to be a difference between wholesale and retail.
Right.
You know, we can't like go forward. That's a toxic price point. And
let's do it.
Okay.
Let's do a deep dive then. Because I was going to ask you that actually about.
We got all sorts of shit. We got pricing, we got economics, we got fighting, we got all sorts of shit to talk about.
I know. We'll get to the fighting last, I think. But let's do the economic thing. I was going to ask you about whether the decision to stop producing Vulcan, or taking a break from it anyways, was related to the economic constraints. I think you were good about setting good prices, or raising the price of surfboards essentially at the retail end.
Yeah.
But the question that I had for you was, if Vulcan can't make it, then who can in the California board manufacturing? Because you were setting the bar for pricing essentially for shortboards, and they were worth it. They were worth every penny, and the consumer was willing to pay it.
Yeah.
So how much of the decision to stop making Vulcan was economic?
I think it's different for me because with Vulcan, because as I had said before, I'm a board builder. Okay, I'm not just a shaper. And nothing against them, but there's a big difference between the guy who shapes the board and then drops it off on a glass shop, and a guy that actually builds the whole thing. I personally feel if you're going to make boards, and you're trying from the business standpoint, with the idea that you're going to make a living doing it, if you're not glassing them, there's no point in even trying, really. Yeah. You got to be glassing them. Yeah. That's where you make all of your money. That's where you make your margin. So with Vulcans, handling all the production in-house, it's a healthy margin. It's a good business model. I would say that the majority of it was my decision was because of emotional reasons and coming to grips with like grief and loss and putting that in perspective and counseling and all that sort of thing. I can come back to it and we can fire everything up in the factory. And because we glass the boards, that's really where we make the margin at. And we did some phenomenal glassing, some amazing boards. You know a Vulcan from a mile away.
So they're talking about the roots of the tree analogy.
Yeah.
I think it's important to discuss the economics of board building in California specifically because we need to ultimately protect the root system because it may go away.
Yeah. I
heard something about this land all around here potentially being for sale or already having been sold. Is there any truth to that?
Well, I mean, there's definitely a redevelopment. Okay. Now, and this building, say for instance, the owner who had been a longtime owner and owned several properties in this surf ghetto where a lot of the production is, he sold it and it was purchased by a new owner, and they've made a lot of changes. Now, I don't know if they're specifically trying to move like the surf industry out. I haven't felt that, but to tell you honestly, I know I'm one of with the previous owner, I'm one of the few people that consistently paid their rent, month in, month out for going on like a decade. Mm-hmm. So I think to me as an asset, we were a good and functional tenant. No reason to get rid of us. But I will tell you, like I've seen so many people come and go, surf businesses come and go in this valley. I have a joke that the road to Oceanside Surf Ghetto is paved with the dried husks of all the people that came and went.
Yeah. Well, I heard that the real estate development plan for this area was more transitioning towards residential.
Well, that has happened because across the way they opened an assisted living senior development, which I was really concerned about because there's a tremendous element of this area right in here is basically an active crime scene.
Last time I was here, there was cops questioning somebody right out front.
Dude, it's an active drug scene, really is what it is. Yeah. And I see that. I see like the absolute devastation like the methamphetamine has caused. I've seen that happen over like the last 15 years. Talked to the cops a lot about it, like how the formulation of meth changed. And it used to be that, the addicts were somewhat functional, and then there was a change in the formulation. Wasn't totally clear as to whether that was a restriction on raw materials or a different source. But when that happened, like the users go from casual user to like ditch level like that, and they don't really come back. There's like a really heavy psychological component that comes with it. It's really scary. And you see the fallout all around here. Yeah. So I was really worried about the senior center there because there's the donut shop, and I thought, well, these seniors are going to come to the donut shop. What's going to happen when the ecotone between this and this, what happens? They've opened up a car wash here, which that is booming. So I don't know what it's going to mean to us. What it means to California, I don't know, because really there's very little inducement to make anything like anymore. And for a long time, I felt like I was the only one dumb enough to make anything, not just in this country, but in California.
Yeah.
As it were, I might have the last laugh.
Well,
I would like to own my own building, though.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it would be in Oceanside.
Where would it have to be?
Closer to home. Closer home. I like the Brescia area. I have some clients that are already down in the Brescia area, and their building is beautiful, and they don't have the same kind of homelessness and drug abuse and things like that.
Well, so my concern with the redevelopment here was if there's a huge board building legacy here.
Yeah.
And if that gets displaced, it's a lot harder to open up a new factory, especially if you're laminating.
Oh.
The city is not likely to approve that, depending on what city you're in. And so it's easier to kind of grandfather in the business and have maybe, even if you sell it, a new owner takes over the same space and they don't have to rebuild it or all that. So that was my concern, was if everybody gets displaced, you would probably only see 80% of those people actually reopen, kind of a thing,
Yeah.
But the protection of the California board building legacy is super important.
Yeah.
And we've seen a lot of, like you said, those businesses going away. And so a direct correlation for the survival rate is increased prices. If board builders can increase prices, they can afford to invest in their own business.
Yeah.
And the legacy of the future of it.
But they have to do it. They have to do it. And they have to make that bridge from like cottage industry to actual industry, to economically making sense. And, in the past, historically, there's a lot of board builders, they're not business people, and they don't look at it from that perspective. And they can go, years trading dollars and hand to mouth. You can't do that anymore. And with inflation being what it is, like the silver lining in that is like we really have to establish logical pricing. Got to raise the prices on your board. And I've been after a lot of the people that I work with. It's like, you got to raise your prices. Got to raise your prices.
Good.
And for the health of the industry, for the health of all of us. And we can't, there's a lot of like toxicity in terms of pricing. There's a lot of people like poisoning the well. I think with inflation, like now is a perfect time to address that and take a really hard look at it.
I do too. And I'm glad to hear you pushing your clients that direction because, like you said, the cottage industry thing and the backyard shaper thing, their idea of what is a good profit margin to run their business on, they're just thinking enough for me to kind of cover my expenses, pay my bills, have a little spending money. They're not necessarily thinking about buying the building, having the profit margin in to buy the machine, having a profit margin in to properly pay your taxes, to potentially hire employees. All of those investments that you're going to need to make in the future to actually grow your business, you need to build that profit margin in now and start allocating those funds accordingly. Just to have QuickBooks on your computer, that's expensive, things like that. I think a lot of the shapers for decades never, ever thought about.
No.
And there's no way for the California board building industry to exist in 10 years from now if the current shapers aren't making those investments.
Yeah, I mean, for the business model as it exists, I agree with you, but I will say that I see like a new, like an emerging trend that will exist, and that is the user submitted design, like the surfer shaper that is not they're making their own boards, right? And they have their own designs and they're glassing their own stuff, and it's rad, and I love it. And I will tell you that a big part of Paragon has been helping these guys, and they've got really cool ideas, and they're really stoked about like their ideas, and they've got some really neat things. We've built some some of like the most exciting designs, honestly, I've seen like in the last few years have come from like just guys, just these ordinary guys, ordinary surfers that decided like, hey, I want to make my own board, you know?
So these would be the equivalent to a backyard shaper of previous decades, where
Yeah.
they go and just buy an individual blank and hand shape it, but instead they're learning the design software.
Yeah, exactly. They're learning, and also a growing part of our business has been training people. Has been training people on 3DX, and we've had a lot of like backyard guys contact us. And 3DX is an amazing piece of software, but it's very nuanced. It's not user friendly. There's a lot of things that are quirky, and it can be challenging. So we do online classes to help people, and they learn the nuances of 3DX and the fundamentals of using it, as well as the fundamentals of board design. They're making some incredible shapes. There's no doubt about it. They're making some incredible shapes. And going back to the talk about economics and pricing, this has been a huge opportunity to address something that is a concern that we both share, which is logical pricing. And I take this opportunity in servicing these backyard guys to establish logical retail pricing, because you are not entitled to the same pricing as the wholesale manufacturer. And we're very adamant about this. But we cannot, as an industry, we cannot miss this opportunity. And it's a wonderful opportunity to establish logical pricing and go forward, because I agree with you. I don't think that the business model as it is, the cottage industry, will make it going forward. But I feel like this model of servicing the backyard guy and establishing logical retail pricing for this service is it's amazing, because it undoes like decades of really fucked up pricing. And I've been really critical, about a number of places like that, because they'll sell, services or materials to whoever at the wholesale cost, whether it's a board builder or a backyard guy. And now that's not right, because if you're building boards, you're incurring all sorts of costs, and all of which, like you had mentioned earlier, not to mention now like the water quality board and doing like the environmental study and keeping up with that. There's a lot of expenses. So
the example there would be a backyard shaper can go to the local distributor of blanks and board building materials and buy something for the same price that you would walk in there and buy it for.
Exactly.
Build it in his backyard, sell it to your clients essentially, or you're competing for the same clients, but you have all the overhead built into your business, so he can undercut your pricing.
Right. That happens.
So what you're saying is there needs to be a different price structure for somebody who's not operating a business.
Yes. And
with a license from the state of California, held to the standards of the EPA and everything that comes with it.
Exactly.
Got it.
Exactly. And so, we can't, I'm not missing this opportunity.
Got it. So when a client comes to you, then you provide the blank for them, charge them for the cut, charge them maybe for the education of the teaching of the software.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes. Yeah.
So then they have to sell the board for a certain number that is on par with the rest of what businesses are selling surfboards for.
Yeah, but I will tell you that I would say the majority of those backyard guys, they're just surf stoked guys. Like they're not like, they don't really have any idea of making this like a business. They've just got an idea and they want to make it and they want to build it and they want to do it themselves. I love the idea of like the maker, and you've seen that like over the last few years. Guys that are making all sorts of stuff, whether it's, via 3D printing or a CNC or whatever, but they're making all kinds of stuff. And I look at these guys as like makers too. And they're making their own things. And so to them, it's like the joy of that process, not so much like the industry. And to me, that like kind of speaks to like the soul,
Yeah.
you know, of the whole process. And so I'm happy about that.
Yeah, I am too. I like it. Yeah. When was the last time you surfed?
It's been a couple years.
Why?
Same thing. I felt like my surfing comes from like a very emotional place, you know, and you know, with all the things that I went through, I was not like in a really good headspace, and just before 2020, I had a really gnarly incident at Swami's, and I was nearly arrested, and that was really heavy. It was really heavy.
The residual effects of that have dissuaded you from surfing.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It's a different world, man. It's a really different world. Like,
So what was the incident?
so it was me and John Frazier and Sean McNabb. We're out surfing Swami's, like kind of like on an off day, which is really the only time you want to surf that place anymore. And I love that wave, and I'm a regular foot surfer, so it's just, you know, and there's a lot of knuckleheads that go there, but you know, you get the hang of like surfing there. You know when to go and when not to go. But anyways, we had met and we had all gone out for a surf, and there's this guy. He's a real estate agent, and he's a really fucking aggro surfer, because there's a lot of these guys that like they're professionals, right? And like they're surfing, their leisure activity is got to follow like within this time period. They're gonna get in and get out, you know. And it's not how I surf, and that's not how anybody I know surfs, you know. But there's guys that are like it, and they're really, really fucking intense. This is the kind of guy that, like, everyone, when you see him paddling out, everyone kind of goes like,
Yeah, totally.
this, like, fuck, man. And so I'd had arguments with this guy before, and I saw him, and I'm like, right. I'm just going to paddle way outside and wait for set waves. And so that's what I did. And I figured he'll hang with those guys and surf inside. So sure enough, here comes the set wave, and I'm stroking for it, and I'm approaching him on the inside. He sees this, okay, and starts paddling aggressively towards me, and then deeper, and then takes off. I take off, and then he takes off behind me. And
So he like back paddles.
Yeah,
but you're up riding first.
yeah,
you guys.
yeah, because I specifically knew, like, well, I knew it was
saw
going to
it coming.
happen. I'm going to stay way away from you. And sure enough, like, you've gone so far you're out of your way to like make yourself a hassle. And so now he's yelling at me, and fuck you, like,
Totally.
you know. So I just conserve. Next thing I know, doesn't the guy dive and tackle me at the waist, and we both fly off our boards and get tumbled, and I'm like, oh my God, I cannot fucking believe you just tackled me, because this sends a very clear message of how this is gonna go from here. Like, if you lay hands on me, I'm gonna lay hands on you, and you're not gonna like how it's gonna go. And when he came up, I came up first, it's on. And I pummeled this guy. And then I held him underwater a little bit too. And everyone was like, oh my God, whoa, you know. But I'm defending myself in my mind. Because I've seen a number of fights. And anyways, now he's bleeding. He's bleeding from here, he's bleeding from there. And I'm furious, and everyone's like, oh my God, stop, you know. So he gets out of the water and leaves. And I'm thinking, like, okay, problem solved.
Totally.
You know, problem solved. And my hand was kind of fucked up, because this was, I don't know if you saw that accident I had. I broke and I dislocated and I tore the extensor ligament off my thumb. Like 3 or 4 months earlier, and it was just one of the first times I had surfed after getting this steel rod taken out of my thumb. Well, didn't I partially, in this altercation, tear the extensor ligament off again? I never got it fixed. So this is where fighting gets you.
Right.
So anyways, I think it's done. And we surf for a little while longer, and then I realized my back, where I got tackled, I hyperextended, and it's hurting now. It's, well, I got to go in. So I get out, climb the staircase, and don't I get up on top, and there's 3 sheriff's deputies waiting for me. And put down your board, step over here. Now I'm in handcuffs in the Swami's parking lot, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, now I'm that guy, you know? This is awesome. And a couple people had, you know, were like, oh my God, you know, this is terrible, and, you know, snap, and they were freaking out, and I'm like, don't worry about it, like, there's nothing we can do now, like, I'm not going to resist, just comply with law enforcement, and this will be resolved. And getting ready to go into the cop car, and all of a sudden this gentleman steps forward, and he says, look, he's like, I'm not sure if I want to get involved. He's speaking to the police, but I have something, and I think you should see it. Well, this is a local photographer. His name's George Atkins, and he's an amazing photographer, and he had amazingly captured the entire incident, not just on stills, but in video as well. And showed the cops. And David, it was awesome how the shoe went on the other foot and the tables were turned. The handcuffs came off.
Wow.
I'm being addressed as sir. And sir, do you want to press charges against this man? And they talked to that man and said, wait a minute, you attacked this gentleman? He kicked your ass, and then you fucking called us to... No. So anyways, I said, no, I don't want to press charges. There's no point in you being here. This was resolved, and this is all fucking stupid. Anyways, like, you know, that combined with, like, all the things that I had gone through, and I think everyone can see, too, that, like, surfing is not like how it was, like, 10 years ago, or like when I grew up when I was a kid, when basically there was no one around. It's gotten very crowded, and I felt like it was a good time for me to take a break. And again, because like my surfing comes from like an internal part, and there was a lot of like internal like things going on, and so it was a good time to take a break. Also got my left knee replaced during that period of time, which is going awesome. I just went for some amazing hikes around Tahoe this last week. So yeah, but it's been a couple years. I'll come back around. Interesting observation, though. It's like there has been a number of people. There's a lot of new people that have come into surfing. And I heard Chaz call it like the era of the adult learner, which I thought was funny.
The VAL, vulnerable adult learner.
The vulnerable. Well, the funny thing is I've never had a problem with a VAL. I've never had a problem with the VAL. I know how to stay around them, navigate around them, and by the contrast, like I'm happy to see them because like they're stoked and they're stoked to learn and they're happy. They need to know like the rules and like how things work, but I'm happy they're there and like I'm happy that they're happy and they're having fun. The only people I've ever had problem with surfing is like the hard-boiled local bitter guys. That's the only person I've ever had a problem with.
What happened with the realtor? Does he still surf? I mean, is he still creating problems?
Yeah, it's funny because
I'm just wondering if beating him up changed his behavior in any way.
Well, we talked about that, and I talked to a number of my friends, and they said like, oh, well, yeah, I'm sure like he'll like have learned his lesson, and I will tell you, it didn't change a fucking thing.
Really?
Yes, because I've talked to people in Cardiff who know him. A friend of mine who was telling me this incident and said, yeah, this fucking guy was surfing like a complete asshole, and I grabbed the nose of his board. It was like after like the second or third time like he had dropped in me, I grabbed my board and said, hey, we don't surf here like that. And he got all pissy and this and that. As it turns out, it's the same guy.
Wow.
And it's amazing. So no, it didn't change a fucking thing.
Yeah.
But what I learned is things can spiral out of control really quickly. Boy, the minute like you are in the realm of police and courts and stuff, you've lost, you know. Even when you win, you lose.
Yeah.
You could lose your business. You could lose a lot. There's a liability.
Which he should be worried about because his business is so public.
Oh,
he could be canceled. You know?
It was, well, and it's funny too, is because like I know every realtor, and like I build their boards, or like we're friends and this and that, and they know this guy, and it's just stupid because, yeah, you're shitting in the well, like
right.
You don't want to be like that guy. But no, did it change him? No, not at all. And fighting is pointless and is stupid. And you know, self-defense is something entirely different than just fighting. But even that puts you in a terrible peril. Like,
you don't even want to, have to be in a position to defend yourself.
No,
you know?
you just don't. You want to do your best to avoid that. Hey, you win.
Yeah.
You know?
So have you had any conversation with that realtor after that incident?
No.
Okay.
No.
Interesting. I mean, the shame of all of that is that you haven't surfed since.
Well, you know, it's I'll come back to it, you know, and I feel like my mind and my heart are getting right again, and when I feel like the time is right, you know, I'll come back to it, and it'll be different. It's interesting because, like, it's funny, people talk about, like, you know, the stoke and, like, you know, the freedom and the peace that, like, comes from surfing. Like, for me, like, I would see that, like, if I go to the mountains, right? You know, if I go to the mountains, I go hiking, or if I go snowboarding, and people are happy and they're joyful, and there's no localism, like, yeah, don't go down that run, that's my run, you know. That doesn't exist. Like, the joy and the happiness and the stoke and the stuff, I see that exists there. I didn't see it existing in the water so much. So, but I will come back to it, and my knee will be better, and I think it'll be a great experience.
With that, and with surfing, and also with the work you were doing with Vulcan, do you miss those things? Yeah,
I do, because there's nothing more amazing than building your own board and surfing your own board. And I've got models. One of them I've licensed out, that was a model that was hard gotten. Like, it took me 6, if not 7 iterations of doing the same board and making subtle changes to get it to perform exactly the way I needed it to perform. And then when that happens, it's amazing. But that process of learning and trial and error and changing and rebuilding, like, that's an amazing process. And there's such a, you know, I've thought about, like, what makes you happy, like, in life, and, like, accomplishing things, like, and accomplishing goals, like, is one of those things that makes me really happy. And I think a lot of people would discover that too, in building their own board and finding that happiness and that accomplishment. So, yeah.
I wonder, I totally hear you and sympathize with you for taking time off from those things, but I also wonder if the process of those things is also therapeutic, and you're missing out on some of that therapy along the way.
I think conventional therapy has helped me more.
Okay.
I think conventional therapy has helped me more
Good.
with my things, and I have come to, like, a new objectivity. You know, my therapist says, like, you gotta, like, say, like, you just had a lot of life happen, and I did. I had a lot of life happen.
Yeah.
And yeah, the conventional therapy has helped me a lot. I was not in a good place, and honestly, I had a lot of anger, and I'm afraid of, like, my anger, honestly. And you know, I don't want to present that to the world. I don't think anybody should. But I do feel like, you know, there's, like, I love the joy of surfing, and there is a certain amount of therapeutic benefit to work, and I feel that with Paragon. And I feel like it's also been helpful, like I said, to play more of that role on the root side, you know, the supportive role in the industry, and done like amazing things, and we've worked with amazing people, and that's brought me a lot of happiness.
Good.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would have done differently about that fight incident with hindsight?
You know, it's really hard. I mean, I thought about it, and I thought, well, maybe I shouldn't have hiked the stairs there. Maybe I should have gone down to, like, you know, San Alejo and come up there. I don't know. I honestly never thought that, like, the cops would be at the top of the hill. I could have, when I saw him, I could have gotten out of the water, but nobody wants to be that guy. Like, all of a sudden you're dictating the terms of my life and you're going to force me out of the water. I did go out of my way to stay away from him, which I do advocate to anybody, you know, who knows that a confrontation is looming. I don't know, like, what I could have done differently, and it was just by such luck that the man George had been there to capture the whole incident, because I would have been screwed.
I just ask because it's a relatable scenario to be in. I think we've all been in that scenario where you have that asshole in the lineup and you see them paddling out and you cringe, and it automatically affects the rest of your session and the rest of your day.
Yeah.
And you do start repositioning in the lineup, and then you're just running through all these scenarios in your head, all of that anxiety that comes with it. It's like, how do we avoid letting other people dictate our emotions in that way? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how to just let it go.
I honestly don't think you can, and it's hard as, like, you know, as a man, like, as a guy, like, you know, you want to stand your ground, and, like, you know, you're not going to tell me, like, I'm going to surf, and you're not going to, you know, impose your will, like, on my session. But what I found is, it's whether you argue with somebody or whether you fight with somebody, like, you don't change anybody's mind.
Clearly not.
Yeah, you don't change anybody's mind. I learned this from, you know, Dale Carnegie.
Yeah.
You know, like, when you fight, when you argue with somebody and you try and, like, convince them through argument of your way, you don't, all you do is you force them to dig their fucking heels in harder. The minute you push them is the moment they dig in their heels to show you and prove to you how wrong. When you win, you lose. When you lose, you lose. There's just no winning. I think the only thing you can do is, through your own positive right action, illustrate to people over the long haul that, you know, non-confrontation is the right way. You know, and I think you do that by being a gracious person, letting them, like, have their trip, you know, following the rules, respecting others, respecting yourself, and hopefully over time they'll see that and say, you know what is that man doing? What is that woman doing? What are they doing that is leading to their happiness and their joy and their success? How can I emulate that? Or, you know, I can recall very distinctly, like, when I had that revelation, I realized, like, my God, I've been an asshole, you know? And I hope that I hope that he will have that revelation and say, man, I'm an asshole. Like, I hear it from, like, I see it from everybody. And in the world, when you bring, like, that aggression into the world rises up to meet you in equal opposition. It's got to be a very hard way to live.
Well,
so,
yeah, I remember somebody saying, like, if you go through your day and all you do is encounter assholes, it turns out you're the asshole.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So
exactly. And it takes a toll. So in that way, I feel kind of sorry for him, because I see a lot of people like that, and I don't see it just in the water. I see it, like,
but the water dynamics have changed.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's kind of the other thing is him. I don't know if he's a Val. I don't know if he's been surfing 20 years and he's always been an asshole.
He's a good surfer.
Okay. So the Vals or the current surfers, as stoked as they might be, they're not going through the same rites of passage that we had to go through when we were young, where there was a hierarchy and a certain respect.
Yeah.
Like the fact that he back paddled you, I would imagine in his head, he thought he had priority at that point.
Yeah.
So you're coming into it going, this is my wave because of the way that I learned how to surf. And he's going, no, this is my wave because I got behind you. And I don't care if you were up and riding and you were paddling first. I'm up behind you, which means you better get off.
Yeah.
And so that's going to end in conflict always.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
which is problematic.
It is. It is. It definitely was a problem that day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of in closing, in a previous conversation we had, you were kind of candid and open up and talking about struggles with depression and mental health in general.
Yeah.
I think you've already alluded to how the loss of your sister has affected your mental health.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what has been helpful in navigating through that stuff?
Yeah, therapy for sure. And, now there's more opportunities and availability of therapy. And it's easier and it's more affordable to do now than it ever has been. I found an awesome online resource for therapy, which has been very helpful, and I've got a therapist now. She's on the East Coast, so we have a little bit of a time difference, but finding the right therapist is huge. And somebody
that is key.
Yeah.
Finding the right one, because it's difficult to. Not all therapists are going to be beneficial for you.
Right.
And if you have that bad experience and you spend an hour divulging all your secrets to somebody and it's not a great fit, you might just think therapy's bad for you.
Right.
Or not right for you.
Exactly.
But it might just be that you need to talk to 3 or 4 different therapists until you find that, connection.
Yeah. So there's a commitment there, to finding the right one. I went through a couple before I found her, and it's been a tremendous. She has been able to listen and see all the factors and get to know all the players, and then objectively say, this is what I think about this, and I think this is what would be important for you. And then you've got to listen and incorporate these things into your life, and do the work to make those changes. And if you do, it's amazing, the changes that can happen. And so I would encourage that towards anybody who's listening, and to talk about these things openly. And being 52, talking about these things wasn't always something that you talked about. I can remember in high school, you could not say you were depressed. It's what do you live? You have scented candles too, fuck you, get over it. But now it's awesome. I find we live in a world where it's acceptable to say these things, and it's responsible to take charge of your own mental health. And I went through some really fucked up things, but you don't even have to go through some of the shit that I went through in order to benefit from therapy.
Good. Good.
Yeah.
Where can listeners get a hold of you? Obviously, they can't buy a Vulcan right now, but maybe they do want to sign up for the Shape 3D lessons and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, info@paragonmilling.com is our website, and there's and we also have our Instagram, which has been cool because I show the different projects we're working on, and that's amazing too, because I find people are they're really receptive to the idea of millwork and scanning and design, the digital element in the surf industry, more than they ever have been before. So you can look us up on Instagram as well, under I think Paragon CNC or Paragon Milling.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's CNC.
Yeah.
I'll post it on the website.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dane. It's been wonderful.
Thank you, David. Happy Father's Day.
Yeah, you too.
Congratulations to us both, and thanks so much for the opportunity to talk.
Gladly.